Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom, I'm David Mensa, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate here in the office of the Prime Minister. It's Thursday, the 7th of November, day 398 of the October 7th war, this war for Israel's revival. Firstly, on the election of President-elect Donald J. Trump, the Prime Minister spoke for the nation when he congratulated his historic return to the White House. The Prime Minister said that it offers not only a new beginning for America, but also a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between our two nations. I can share with you that the Prime Minister and the President-elect shared a warm and cordial conversation last night. The Prime Minister was amongst the first to make the call. Last night, with both leaders agreeing to work together for Israel's security, as well as the threat posed by Iran. Two great democratic nations once again reaffirming their partnership. Next, on Israel's fallen soldiers, it is with regret that I share with you that since the start of the war, 781 soldiers have made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our homeland. Sergeant Ariel Soznov was aged just 20 years old. He was from Jerusalem. He fell fighting for his country in the north of Israel. There are no words of mine that can assuage the pain of their parents and families. We embrace them and those dear families who have lost their precious heroes, sons and daughters in this war for our very existence. The price of war is heavy and painful. Each casualty is a world unto itself. May their memories be a blessing forever. Next, the latest figures I have to share with you on casualties in northern Israel from Hezbollah rocket, drone and missile fire. Hezbollah have killed 74 people. That's 43 civilians, among them 6 foreign nationals, Indians and Thais. This is from within Israel. And 31 soldiers have lost their lives within Israel. 640 people have been wounded, of them 410 civilians and 230 soldiers. In Lebanon overnight, with precise intelligence, our Air Force struck Hezbollah in the area of Beirut. Prior to the strikes, we warned civilians to get out of harm's way. No other army does that. Yes, Hezbollah, like Hamas, embeds its terror infrastructure in civilian areas. That's a double war crime. Using Lebanese people as human shields, hiding their weaponry and carrying out attacks at Israeli civilians, a double war crime. Our people must be allowed back to their homes in Israel's sovereign north. Next to the changes in the cabinet, as you will have seen on Tuesday, the Prime Minister appointed Yisrael Katz as the new Minister for Defense, as befits his long experience in government on defense and security issues. The Prime Minister also invited Minister Gideon Sa'ar to join the coalition along with his faction and serve as the Minister for Foreign Affairs. For more details, the Prime Minister made a full statement on Tuesday. Next, an update from COGAT, getting aid into Gaza. Our humanitarian efforts are continuous and ongoing. Let me give you the latest, as I do every day. The total aid that has gone into Gaza since the start of this war is 1,108,615 tons. That's 1,108,615 tons of humanitarian aid. That is a huge amount. It's more than enough to feed everyone there, more than 70% more food than went in prior to this war. So within that humanitarian aid, that is food, medication, vaccines, all delivered daily with no limits. Just yesterday, for the latest figures, 119 aid trucks went into Gaza via Kerem Shalom and the Erez crossings. 47 trucks were collected from the Gazan side of Kerem Shalom by aid organizations, and every day we hear the same slur that more aid should go in, or Israel is restricting aid. People talk about 200 trucks a day, 300 trucks a day. And every day I make the same comment to you. And I remind you from this podium that 675 trucks worth of aid are simply awaiting collection from the Gazan side of Kerem Shalom. So that's 6 tankers of cooking gas also went in. A convoy of 25 trucks entered directly through Gate 96. 231 patients and their caregivers exited Gaza through the Kerem Shalom for treatment in the UAE and Romania. All this was coordinated by Israel. And as I've made clear before, that 12 bakeries are currently operating in Gaza, large bakeries, 4 in the north, 8 in the center and south, together baking more than 3 million pita loaves every single day. On the vaccines against polio campaign, the second round has been successfully completed. Hundreds of thousands of children have been vaccinated. Hundreds of medical teams carried it out, all coordinated by Israel and COGAT in partnership with the World Health Organization and UNICEF. In this highly effective vaccination campaign, 93% of Gazan children under the age of 10 were vaccinated. That is a tremendous success. Hamas clearly wanted a polio outbreak, and Israel has prevented one. Hamas wanted a humanitarian disaster inside Gaza. That's why they initiated this war against us, and once again, Israel has prevented one. So that's the end of our briefing today. Please put your questions in the chat together with your news outlet, and we'll be happy to take them. Okay, first question I can see here is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Firstly, multiple reports suggesting that the incoming Trump administration would like Israel to wrap up the ongoing war. If you could just go up for a second. There we go. Sorry. Multiple reports suggest the incoming Trump administration would like Israel to wrap up the ongoing war by the time he takes office. Is that feasible? Thank you very much for that question, Joel. Look, Israel has made absolutely clear that we also would like to end this war as quickly as possible, but the war will continue. Together with our partners in the US and others around the world, until all of our goals are met. It is Hamas that is holding our hostages. They must be brought home as soon as possible. They must be set free as soon as possible. They must be returned, all of them. The dismantling of Hamas's governmental and military capabilities, removing the terrorist threat to Israel, and returning our residents safely to their homes in the north. Those are our war aims. This war will be over when we have achieved our war aims, and in partnership with our allies, we will achieve our war aims. Next question. Reports suggest that Tiffany Trump's father-in-law, what we might call one of President-elect Trump's Machatunim in Yiddish. This is Joel Pollack's question. Will lead negotiations between the US and Lebanon. Does Israel have any reaction? Thank you for that question, Joel. I haven't seen those reports. We, of course, here in Israel recognize that the relationship between the US and Israel is a long-standing one. It's a bipartisan one. We've very much appreciated the support which the Biden administration has shared with this country. It's been absolutely key in achieving our objectives, to get our hostages home, to defeat Hamas, to destroy them militarily and their governing capabilities, and to get our people home into their homes in the north. We are two great nations, two great democracies. We also appreciate, of course, what we know that the Biden administration has done in the past. Many in these states, presidential candidates talked about moving the embassy, the US embassy, from Tel Aviv to its rightful place in our homeland, in the homeland of the Jewish people, in the capital, in the eternal capital of the Jewish people, in Jerusalem. Only President Trump did that. the Abraham Accords. People said it was impossible. Yeah, the peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors would have to go through the Palestinians, and they held the veto on normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Again, Trump drove a coach and horses through that idea. And of course, we know that President Trump has a real understanding of the situation and the threats which Israel's face. So we, of course, look forward to working together with the Trump administration. Of course, there is only one president at a time in the US, and that's very important to remember. But we very much look forward to working with the Trump administration to pursue peace in this region. Israel wants peace. We search for peace. We are always, our first hand is first and foremost to peace. So President-elect Trump, we would very much welcome his efforts, as he has done in the past. He's got an excellent track record of supporting this country in normalizing relations with its Arab neighbors. Next, on the, I can see a question here from Celine from Sky News. Your question, Celine, is on Tuesday, IDF General Itzik Cohen told Israeli journalists that, quote, there is no intention of allowing the residents of the northern Gaza Strip to return to their homes. Can you confirm this is also the government's vision and explain what the future for northern Gaza is if residents won't be allowed back? Thank you for that question, Celine. Let me share with you, firstly, I think, look, first things first, the army in this country, in this democracy, in this sovereign democracy, the army, as is the case in the UK and in the US and other countries with democracies, the army acts in accordance with the wishes of the elected government. That is true here, as it is true in the States, as it is true in other countries as well. So that's the first point to make. But let me answer your point directly. At this point right now, there are residents of the northern part of Gaza who have been evacuated to safer places. Why? Because wherever there are Gazan civilians, that's where Hamas seek to embed themselves again, to hide themselves amongst civilians, to draw Israeli fire to the civilians. That is their objective. Again, a double war crime, using ordinary Gazans as a human shield and firing at Israel from those places, Israeli civilians. So first and foremost, we've moved them to the humanitarian area in Al-Mawasi. We are very clear that they will not be allowed to move back again for as long as anti-terror operations continue in the northern part of the Strip. The IDF will always keep Gazan civilians out of harm's way to make sure they will not be used as human shields, as is the Hamas terrorist way. From the Iranian playbook, Hezbollah uses that method as well. We are fighting against it. We are isolating Gazan civilians away from Hamas terrorists so we can get to the terrorists. Now, Gazans are not going anywhere. Israel is not going anywhere. And as long as Palestinian terrorists will not release the hostages, we will continue fighting the terrorists and doing everything in our power, and I mean everything in our power, to rescue the hostages. 101 of them. US citizens amongst them. British people among them. A Brit amongst them. I remember him very, very well. Children amongst them. 13 women amongst them. Pensioners amongst them. It is pure evil, and we will not stop until we get them home. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. Okay, next question. Just go up. There we go. Question from Jim Williams at Zenga International News. With the election of a news president, policy changes are expected. Setting aside the policy aspect, the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump team, will the transition from one administration to another cause any delay in services provided to the IDF as they continue to engage on multiple fronts? Thank you for that question, Jim. I think this is really a question for the US administration, but I think that past experience has shown that the US administration really leads the world in the peaceful transition of power between different administrations after elections. It's a symbol of the strength of the US democracy, and it's something which is an example to the entire world. So, as I said, the relationship between our two nations, it's a bipartisan relationship. It's bigger than any one party or the other party. It's a relationship between of shared values, but also shared enemies as well. And the IDF has already announced today the continuation of the support of the US in updated F-15 fighter jets, so we can defend ourselves against the Iranian threat, whether it's from the Houthis, whether it's from Hezbollah, whether it's from Hamas, whether it's from the Shia militias in Iraq, or whether it's directly from Iran. They're our enemies, but they're US enemies as well, which is why that seamless transition of power to protect the US as well as Israel is so important, and I think the US leads the world in that respect. Next question from Itai Stern from NPR. Does Israel plan to create a buffer zone in the south of Lebanon? It seems like the demolition of villages is a way for Israel to keep this area near the border empty. Thank you very much for that question, Itai. I will just take issue on that question because, you say that the demolition of villages is a way for Israel to keep this area near the border empty. I do take issue with that because the reason we have taken the action against these villages in particular is they have been staging posts, very complex, very developed tunnels and staging posts for the invasion of this country. Now, Itai, we have provided evidence of this. We have shown you the huge tunnel networks, the plans called Operation Conquer the Galilee, whereby Hezbollah built up ammunition and weapons and heavy weapons as well, and missiles in those southern villages, not to protect those villages, but to invade this country. This is not something which I'm telling you. This is Hezbollah's strategy, which they have shared in public. They talk about the invasion of this country. So I do take issue with that fact. Now, the Prime Minister just last week visited the north, and he saw for himself the way that Israel is changing the reality on our northern border. We're not going to sit after the October 7th war against us, the invasion against us. We will not allow that to happen again with the best armed, the best funded terrorist organization in the entire globe on our northern border. The Prime Minister met and saw for himself the heroic and the brave work of Israel's army on the ground, eliminating entire underground terrorist networks that Hezbollah had prepared to raid the Galilee and carry out an even bigger massacre than the one that occurred in Israel. So we've prevented that from happening, not because we have anything against Lebanese people. Of course not. We've pushed them out, or we've encouraged them to go out of harm's way in every single way you can possibly imagine, on the internet, on radio broadcasts, with emails, with text messages, with phone calls, millions of phone calls to get people out of harm's way. And we've said to them, once we have completed the clearing of Hezbollah from our northern border, then Lebanese civilians will be able to come back into to their own homes. We've prevented that attack, but we are, of course, attacking Hezbollah, not the Lebanese people in these areas. The Prime Minister has said, without an agreement, whether there's an agreement or not, the key to restoring calm and security in our north, the key to returning all the residents of our north to their homes, is through a 3-point plan. First of all, to push Hezbollah beyond the Litani River. Second, to strike at any attempt for Hezbollah to rearm itself. We will not allow that to happen, no more. And third is to respond vigorously to any attempt against us. I put this simply. It is about enforcement. It is about enforcement. It is about enforcement. There are UN resolutions, 1701. They say very, very clearly, Hezbollah should not be there. The sovereign army of the Lebanese government should be in the place between our northern border and the Litani River. So we will cut off Hezbollah's pipeline from Iran. Very often it goes through Syria as well. So I think that answers your question comprehensively. Right, next question here I can see is from Fred Ager from, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas congratulated Donald Trump on his victory, expressing confidence in his support for Palestinians' legitimate aspirations for statehood. What is the Prime Minister's office response to the PAs? President, does Israel's PM office expect that President Trump will support and push for a two-state solution? Thank you for that question, Fred. Of course, first and foremost, we are delighted that President Abbas took the opportunity or found the time to welcome the election of President Trump, a democratic election, something that which Mr. Abbas has put off for, I think, more than a decade now, a democratic election for his own people. It's amazing that he found the time to welcome the election, to congratulate President Trump on his election, but he has not found one moment in 400 days to condemn the violence, the rapes, the beheadings, the burning of families alive, the awful invasion of our country. Not one moment has he found, not a single moment. To this day, 400 days on, the so-called moderate leader of the Palestinian Authority has not found a single moment to condemn that violence. Indeed, it's worse than that. I saw him holding a moment's silence and eulogizing the murderer, rapist army-in-chief head, Yahya Sinwar. What an appalling example to his own people. What a lack of leadership for his own people. How he continues to condemn his own people to a rotten future, as he has in their past as well. So I think that's the reaction I would have from the Prime Minister's office to Mahmoud Abbas's congratulations of Donald Trump. Democracy, okay? You should try it sometime. You probably won't be in office if you did. Okay, I don't think that's the last question I can see. Actually, there's a question up there. Let me... oh no, there's another question from Fred Ager. How does Trump, the re-election, really impact Israel for its war of survival against Hamas and other Iranian proxies, the liberation of the hostages and the Abraham Accords? Is, for example, Israel expecting greater military support and presence from the US? Thank you for that question. Look, you mentioned the release of the hostages in that question, Fred. I mean, most of the answer to that question, Fred, is about the US intention, the new administration's intentions. And so I cannot speak from this podium, from the office of the Prime Minister, on behalf of the US, but I can tell you about what we're doing to release our hostages. Yes, of course, we are pursuing the military route, as we have done from the very, very beginning. Of the 252 hostages, more than half have been returned alive, but we know that 101 of them are still under Hamas, in the hands of Hamas. 36 of them, unfortunately, have been killed by Hamas, and their families have been informed from the information that we have. But when it comes to the negotiations route, the Mossad director David Barnea last week returned from Doha, where he met with the director of the CIA and the Prime Minister of Qatar, I can share with you that the sides discussed a new unified framework that integrates previous proposals and also takes into account the main issues and recent developments in the region. The discussions between the mediators and Hamas will continue in the coming days, as they have in the past, in order to evaluate the feasibility of these talks and a continued effort to advance a deal. But Secretary Blinken made clear that once again it is Hamas that is preventing a deal. This Egyptian idea about releasing 4 hostages for a potential cessation in the war against Hamas, a pause, was once again torpedoed by Hamas. As for the other parts of your question, that's really down to the US. Next question I can see here. Okay, one more question from me. Let me just see here. I've read that one. Okay. There's another one from Celine at Sky News. Brigadier General Itzik Cohen also added in the same media briefing previously mentioned that humanitarian aid would be allowed to regularly enter the south of the territory, but not to the north, since there are no more civilians left. You mentioned that there are 4 large bakeries operating in the north. Can you explain the discrepancy here? Thank you for that question, Celine. That's a question for COGAT, Israel's coordination body, which gets aid, more than a million tons of aid into Gaza. And they'll be able to provide the details of that, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer that question. Earlier in my briefing, I provided some briefing about the bakeries in Gaza, providing those millions of pita loaves. Okay, so that is the last question I can see here. Thank you for joining us. The next briefing will be next week. In the meantime, please do stay safe. You're welcome to get in touch in the usual way to deal with your questions. So thank you for joining us, and thank you. Bye-bye.